But the bigger challenge always awaits you in getting the people to adopt the system and taking a step away from the technical focus and moving into the people. And that's something that's really strong in BCG. In fact, we have a thing called the 70-20-10 principle. And what that talks about, 70% of the effort is actually on the people, 20% of the effort is on the data and infrastructure, and 10% is on the algorithm.
Wow. So on that, do you ever have trouble like convincing the clients of the 70-20-10? Like, because it seems like there's just a lot of effort in training the people. And sometimes I think executives might think like, well, the algorithm should be the big part, or the data plus the algorithm, and then the training will be like the second thing we do. Like, how do you go about teaching clients that they need to think 70-20-10?
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Decision Intelligence Lab podcast. Along with my co-host, Michael Watson, I'm Vijay Mehrotra, and I'm pleased to welcome Evan Shellshear to the podcast today. Evan's a principal at BCGX, BCG's technology and innovation arm. And he's got a rich trove of experience, including a technical PhD, startups, large companies, and academia. He's worked on a lot of high-impact projects across mining, manufacturing, supply chains, and he's also the co-author of a recently released and highly acclaimed book called Why Data Science Projects Fail, along with one of our previous guests, Doug Gray. And that book is a real motivator for me around looking beyond the models at the whole of the value chain and how we get from data to successful business outcomes. Evan, welcome to the podcast. And Mike, let me turn it over to you to get us started.
All right. Yeah. Welcome, Evan. Why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about what BCGX does and what you do within BCGX?
Absolutely. And thank you guys for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it's one of kind of my favorite podcasts that I enjoy. And it's an honor to actually join you guys here on it today. So BCGX, what we do and kind of what I do is we help BCG, the traditional strategy consulting part of the business, execute their large-scale digital work, especially when we have to get hands-on. So we've got many, many data scientists and software engineers and product people and designers around the whole world that assist us with taking digital transformations and helping implement them. So not just advising and saying, how do you do it, but actually making they become real and helping organizations realize it. And it's quite technical people such as myself. I think we have something like over 500 PhDs across the organization
Wow.
working in this BCGX part of the business. And part of that is because the type of problems that we face are some of the most complicated and difficult in the entire world.
Wow. I'm still trying to process that group of 500 PhDs and just how much brain power you're bringing to a lot of complex problems. Mike and I have been privileged to read BCG's case study about the Rio Tinto mine. Can you tell us a little bit about Rio Tinto, the scale of the operation there?
So Rio Tinto is one of Australia's kind of exemplary organizations. It's been incredibly successful, been around for well over 100 years, and really operates large-scale, high-quality mines around the world. They're a leader in things like safety, in things like managing the respect to the actual surroundings and in the country within which they operate. They've had issues in the past, but I think they've learned from that and are really going forward as an exemplary organization within global mining. One of the mines they happen to operate is in Western Australia in the Pilbara. The size of the mines and the area they operate in is about the size of Spain. The whole country of Spain is roughly the size we're talking about here. They have 17 mines that they operate across this area. And it is actually the world's largest fully owned and integrated iron ore supply chain. It is phenomenal. It is huge. It has autonomous trains running back and forth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, non-stop, delivering hundreds of millions of tons of product to the ports up in the northwest, Western Australia. It has many, it has over 50 people operating and scheduling it in a remote operations center in Perth that sit there and make sure that this thing runs smoothly day in, day out. It has thousands of kilometers of train track that's been built and owned by Rio Tinto. It has autonomous trucks delivering ore from the mine itself up to the stockpile. So it's really quite an incredible operation and really a global leader in terms of this kind of autonomous and highly technology driven mining operations.
What's like what where's like in general, like how did you approach like helping them with the I think it was the scheduling that you did? How did you even start to tackle that with such a large scale problem? It's like, the logistics of Spain, optimize that.
Look, it's quite incredible because the project that we're working on was replacing a number of legacy systems that had been there for quite a while, and Rio Tinto had tried a number of times to do that and had quite struggled with this. And so we were kind of the organization that was going to come in and do that. And I think the success of it was, and it's a principle that we have in BCG, was realizing that this wasn't going to succeed if we didn't bring the people along the journey. I think it was the technology was a given. It was going to be incredibly complex, like linking all these different parts, running these schedules for these dozens of trains that are running along this network, like setting all these parts up to integrate and work together and to technically optimize all of this is incredibly challenging. But the bigger challenge always awaits you in getting the people to adopt the system and getting the IT team on board and making sure we're building it in a way that they can easily adopt it and easily integrate it into their systems, building it in a way that the schedules, of which there were roughly about 50 of them that were working on these systems, can then easily adopt it into their ways of working or helping them change their ways of working. And then even when you build systems like it, there may not be the capability within the organization to be able to manage it. So you need to then upskill and bring the organization on that journey. And that's really kind of, I feel, the large part of the success here. It's kind of taking a step away from the technical focus and moving into the people. And that's something that's really strong in BCG. In fact, we have a thing called the 70-20-10 principle. And what that talks about in these large scale technology transformations that we do, 70% of the effort is actually on the people. 20% of the effort is on the data and infrastructure, and 10% is on the algorithm. And it's really true. And a project like this was exemplary of that. And the fact that a lot of the effort was in the rollout, the adoption, the phase stages of having two systems running simultaneously, where you build trust with the new system before you could switch off the old system and start using the new system. And it was really this deeply well thought out process that focused on what are the new ways of working, what are the operational changes, what are the capability uplifts required, what are going to be the benefits and the value case for this to drive the internal desire. Because even if all that works, you've still got to make sure it's worth doing. Like you've actually got to make sure that it's a project that's beneficial to them. And in this one here, the value was so clear that within 3 months, the entire investment had been paid back.
Wow. So on that, do you ever have trouble like convincing the clients of the 70-20-10? Like, because it seems like there's just a lot of effort in training the people. And then sometimes I think executives might think like, well, the algorithm should be the big part, or the data plus the algorithm, and then the training will be like the second thing we do. Like, how do you go about teaching clients that they need to think 70-20-10?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And in fact, the book that me and Doug wrote was kind of a piece on that journey to get people away from the technology hype. I think
Yeah.
the hype around the tech's so strong and the way it's been presented to people globally, it's just kind of like, yeah, just get some AI. And that's kind of the attitude a lot of people have. Just get me the AI. I just want the AI. Can I have it next week? And it's like, well, no, your data's not good enough, and so on and forth. I find for mature executives that have strong domain knowledge, the way we help understand the way it works is, first of all, we bring in the concept. In every kind of presentation where we talk about BCGX and the way we do these projects, that's always front and center. And the way it really opens up people's eyes and the way they get the buy-in is because you kind of talk to them and help them understand their own complexity of their operations. Like
Yeah.
any company that's doing more than $1 billion of revenue in some aspect of its business, and I think Rio Tinto does over $80 billion in its part of its business here, is going to be complex. It's going to be quite
Right.
complex. And by having them think about how complex their part of their business is, helps them really understand and move away from the technology and say, hey, look, if we're going to do this, you need to change this, you need to change that, you need to change the way these people operate, you need to hire this set of people. And then all of a sudden they realize, wow, okay, this is going to be a significant change management here to really get the value out of this.
And what I'm hearing there, Evan, really at the core of it is you need to have the courage to speak with senior management about changing the operating model.
Oh, absolutely.
And
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 one of
and,
the
and
yeah,
that I mean, and that a lot of people will avoid that conversation.
because it's a difficult one. But one of the things that helps us, I think, a lot, and you'll see it on BCG's website, is we do a lot of international surveys and a lot of international assessments of way organizations are digitally and AI
Yes.
transforming their businesses. We've got this thing called Built for the Future. And what we do is we survey hundreds, if not thousands, of companies worldwide to understand how are they approaching and succeeding or failing with adopting AI within their organizations. And so via that, we've got incredible statistics on what are the levers that lead to success within businesses when trying to carry out AI transformations. And so behind this, there's so much of this. You've got to bring the people on the journey. You've got to get the strategy right. You've got to have leadership buy-in. And when you can also bring that to a conversation, this kind of answer a bit more your question, Michael, where we've got this data, we've got these facts, we've got your
Yeah.
peers that we've talked to, and they've said, hey, if you want to succeed, you can't forget the people on the journey. Then that kind of also helps us get the buy-in to say, look, this needs a lot of change management. This needs a lot. We've got the data to prove this.
Do you have any special tips for like I've seen this too in my career where, I can imagine Rio Tinto, but you have other projects like this too where, 70% is the people. But think like I think applications like this, it must touch like the frontline workers, like, truck drivers or people who are dispatching trains or like and how do you think about like upskilling that part of the workforce, which I'm sure is important to make the implementation work and get those people to trust that, you guys know what you're doing.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons actually why I joined BCGX. I've worked for many technical companies in my career that just focus on the technical side, and that's exciting. I love it. I love getting into the technical details. It's probably it's going to be the bit where I'm by far the strongest. So, a PhD in applied maths and game theory, that's kind of what I've been taught to do my whole life.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I joined BCG, why I was so excited to be a part of this organization, is because it's the first time where we don't just have the technical, we've got the people that can do the change, right? In most of the organizations I've ever been a part of historically, we're just all technical. We get the order to build the tool, we build the tool, and we give you the tool, and that's what you wanted, and now we're done and we walk away. And now it's your tool, it's your problem, right? Whereas
Right.
BCG doesn't do that. In the projects that I work in, we've got these fascinating kind of combination, at least for me, for them, it's probably obvious. But since I've joined this year, we've kind of got these fascinating combinations, these hybrid teams of the technical people on one side and the core consultants, the traditional management consultants on the other side who are there to understand the business. And they've got the deep domain knowledge and they know the kind of challenges, they know what the incentives and KPIs are for these people. And as we're building the tool, they're working on that change management piece hand in hand and simultaneously. So when the tools are arriving, A, the people are ready, and then B, once the tools are rolled out, they're making sure that they're tracking the value capture. So they can go to the executive team and say, hey, this tool is already getting you back your money within 3 months, like in the Rio example, so that the executives are now behind it. They're going, wow, this is excellent. This is going to help me hit my KPIs to get my bonus at the end of the year. And then within the team, we're making sure that we've assessed the capability. So I think the success of a lot of these things, Michael, the big answer is just being well prepared. So it's going in knowing that actually you don't have the technical skills to manage these tools. So we need to make sure we upskill, hire the right people, and redefine the way your technology function works. And it's knowing from the beginning and even before you begin that these are the gaps within your capability to fully realize the value from this tool. And we have specific streams within our project that are going to address these gaps that we know in advance. And this is nothing technical at all. This is completely separate to the technical team. And this is what's new for me at BCG, having this full view to begin with and having dedicated teams tackling that as a part of the journey.
It is really interesting in a way that it's sometimes quite hard to get those conversations if you haven't come into the organization at the right level. That sounds like
Yes.
one of the things I'm hearing here is that you've got the benefit now of not leading with a technical solution, but really leading with a management change story as part of BCG's core,
Absolutely. And a
right?
big part of that's being driven by values. So in the projects that I've worked in recently, it's been fascinating for me to learn this. Again, I've always been very technical. It's just like build the technical tool, we're done. Whether it makes some money, whether it does whatever, was never a concern of mine historically. Whereas here, before we build any tool, we need to prove, first of all, that it makes commercial sense. So we'll often do a lot of work simulating, reanalyzing the past, looking for the value leakage and proving mathematically that that value leakage exists and is significant enough to chase after. So that's almost the first step and forms the mindset of the executive before we build any technical tool. They've actually got in their mind, hey, there's $50 million of value here to chase. Let's go for it. So they're already bought in. They know that this is going to be amazing. And that kind of upfront step does two things. Not only does it establish the value for the executives, because usually you're not going to build a full-on tool here. You're going to do some analysis. It will use technical capabilities, but it's typically analysis. And also it gives us a feeling for how good is the data in this organization? How ready are the people to do this change? How much IT uplift do we need here? And by doing that value and commercial analysis up front, you kill a lot of birds with one stone before you actually have to dive in and build a tool. It gives you this incredible base that you now have a clear vision as to what's needed to succeed when building these tools. It's quite different. I would typically in the past, like I said, just build the tool.
And I would think that process also helps you inform like what the scope of the project's going to be too. Like can help you both convince yourselves and convince the client like these are the things you need to do because we found these 50 things when we started this project. The data's bad, but okay, now we'll spend more time and money collecting and getting better data. Is that how
Exactly. And I guess what's different is that work's not necessarily a proof of concept. That work is more a commercial framing. That's a value leakage identification. It's a different
yeah.
thing. Like it is a very different thing to a proof of concept, but it's so critical and so valuable. And I only really understood how important it was when I came to BCG and saw it and saw the impact it has on an executive when they know that $50 million is at stake here, then now they're interested. You've got their attention and now they're listening and it's a big piece and you can now kind of talk about all the changes and bring in that research that BCG is starting to establish what's required to be successful, to be built for the future, to the 70-20-10 rule. All these things can now the conversation could be had because the value's big and it's worth doing it properly.
It's interesting kind of with AI right now. One of the things we're hearing over and over again is about pilot purgatory. We've run a pilot. We seem to have had some results. We're not sure how to go forward. What what's your experience been like in sort of driving adoption beyond the pilot with AI?
Yeah, look, it's a similar response to the before. Like it's if you get to the part and you're asking that question, it's probably too late. It's probably too late. And we see these organizations that have this attitude to let 1,000 flowers bloom, and they get frustrated because they don't see the value. They've done 100 POCs, 100 pilots, and like, where's the value? It doesn't exist. BCG does not focus on use cases specifically. What we focus on largely is AI transformation, because for that pilot to turn into something meaningful, something's going to have to change, right? Something will have to change within the organization. AI and IT have an impact on the organization that leads to change. And if that's not built in from day one, then those parts are probably not going to go anywhere. And in addition to that, what the pilot needs to do is, instead of doing just 1,000 random pilots, the way to begin this successfully and do it well is to align pilots with the organizational strategies. Let's begin from the top. Let's understand, where's the organization going? And AI, instead of the tail wagging the dog needs to wag the tail, and AI needs to serve that strategy. AI needs to show how it's going to enable the organization. Because let's take an example like Rio Tinto. They're out there to mine. They're a mining organization. To suddenly give AI the power and authority to operate independently and act like it's now the boss and the mine serves the AI is the wrong way around. The AI serves the mine operations, and you can't lose that sight in your head. And so what that begins with is this kind of strategic view of, okay, what is our strategy? What are we looking to do? And the AI needs to answer that question, is how can it align with the strategy and help? What that then means is that AI is probably going to add a huge amount of value to the organization. So that project, and so that pilot, once it's finished and people look at it, go, there's $50 to $100 million at stake here. We should do this. This is worth doing. Rather than doing 100 pilots and then someone asks the question, what is it worth? And someone goes, oh, it's probably 2 hours of someone's time every month. It was technically fun. It was cool. It was this co-pilot thing that sounded right. Everyone else is doing it, but it's worth 2 hours of someone's time a month, and that's someone who's not necessarily an expensive employee. And so I think if you get to the part and you ask that question, it's too late. It begins with a program where you're looking at what's the strategy, what's the AI transformation. You can do lots of parts within that transformation aligned with the strategy because you're looking to find the thing that will drive the most value. And within that, and plus there's a whole bunch of other things that go with it. But I think that's the largest thing around not missing the alignment with the strategy and not missing the value that comes out the other end that will then get people excited, like we talked about before.
So I'd imagine that BCG and BCGX, you have executive level sponsorship, and you get permission to think big. And I like how you said, like, you're not looking at use cases, like very specific things. You're saying, like, let's look at AI transformation. Let me see if I can frame it. Is this the thinking almost that you go in thinking, if we had to start this business from scratch, here's our strategy, and we have these new tools. Well, how would we build this thing? And then you look at it like from that, almost like a first principles kind of view, and then you can start saying, oh, let's do the big things where there's 50 million, 100 million in savings. Is that a right way to
A-
think about it?
Absolutely, but it doesn't mean that that happens everywhere. So BCG's also got another framework where we talk about deploy, reshape, and invent. So deploying is where we just go in and we deploy a tool. Sometimes that's appropriate because an organization just needs assistance with building a specific tool. They've been working on this for a long time. They've understood it very deeply. They've done their own strategic thinking. They know what needs to happen. And we need to assist them with deploying this tool. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It could be a whole heap of change management, all this other stuff, but
Right.
it's deploying a tool. Reshape means you're now coming in and rethinking the way that part of the organization functions. So when we do it exactly to your point, Michael, we're thinking now AI first. How do you rethink the way this part of the organization works, were it to be built with AI in mind from the ground up, driving the efficiencies and the improvements? And then invent is just you got that blank slate, right? It's like, how do we exactly
Right.
kind of a bit of what you're mentioning. If we were to start this again, how do we do that with AI and have it embedded across the entire organization, all the functions here? And there's kind of the right level at the right point for an organization, depending on their maturity, depending on the commerciality of it, depending on kind of what their strategic objectives are. But it's absolutely a key thing to kind of get right and not to think that by deploying I'm now going to have a 30 to 40% uplift in something, right? It just doesn't happen. You maybe get 5%. To get that 30 to 40% significant impact across the business, you really have to start reshaping and reinventing it.
Right.
That actually kind of leads organically to this challenge around, on the one hand, everybody wants to move quick.
Mhm.
Everyone wants to go fast. Let's go fast. Let's go fast. On the other hand, these large organizations have got a huge amount of machinery. Like, we got to keep the car rolling while we're changing the tires,
Mhm.
right? Are there kind of sort of experiences or perspectives that you've gotten around how to balance that off? Any lessons to share with our audience around that?
Yeah, there's been some really interesting examples of that within Australia where organizations have embarked upon significant programs like that. And it's actually ones in the mining industry that I've heard of from other organizations that kind of friends have talked to me about, where there was one large mining organization here in Australia that wanted to go on such a program, and it needed to the car needed to keep rolling as you change the wheels. And what they realized was the only way to successfully do this was to build the car next to the car as it was driving along, and then at the right point, hop from the one car to the other car and keep driving the new car. Now, what that meant was that was a super expensive program. That was very, very expensive. You had effectively, and this is a large part of the organization we were doing. I think we're talking 50, 100 people or something like that they rebuilt side by side. And so what they recognized was, number one, they had a strategic goal of hitting a mining efficiency price point. So X dollars per ton. That was their goal, to hit that target. And they recognized that they were never going to get there by just trying to adjust the way the current team operates. They realized they needed to stand up a whole new team in a whole new division. And at one point, cut it off and move over to the new division and run with that. And the reason why that project was a significant success was, number one, they knew what the target was. They were going to reduce the cost per ton by a third, which is
Wow.
phenomenal, right? That'll go straight to your
Yeah.
bottom line. Secondly, what they were going to do was invest enough. They recognized to be able to achieve this, we need to invest enough. And the reason why they were able to target that was because they knew if we reduce our cost by a third, we're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's worth spending $100 million or whatever on this transformational project to achieve it. And I think that way of thinking and that approach is one that I've seen that's incredibly successful. I think it's not the only, but it's a way of going, again, coming back to the pilot question, get it aligned with the strategy, make sure the value is big enough, and then go for it with commitment and stick with it even when there are delays and even when there are issues along the journey. And this is kind of what they did, was they stuck with it and eventually realized that value that was worth it, even though it was however many months delayed over the original plan.
Let me ask a question about almost a different topic, a little bit about sort of ongoing maintenance. Like I think this is a challenge that I've faced as a consultant and in different companies is you build a big solution for a client and let's say it does great stuff. And then you think, how do you maintain, how does the client maintain it? Or what's your philosophy? Do you maintain it? Does the client maintain it? How do you keep it up to date? So 5 years from now, when things have changed and the strategy's shifted a little, the underlying solution is still delivering the value.
So this was an incredibly eye-opening thing for me here at BCG. So the organizations I always worked with in the past, their goal was to build up this IP base over time. And it's a really interesting organizational strategy. There are two fundamentally different ones here that I've seen in my career. One is you as a business do this consulting work. And over the years, you build up these bits of IP in your knowledge base, which is often a software platform. A new client comes in and says, I want to solve problem X. And you go, sure thing, I'm going to do it for you. And I'm going to build it on top of my platform. That means I own the IP. I own it. And the reason why I want to own the IP is because I want a trailing revenue stream from you in the form of support, maintenance, licensing fees that I'm going to get off you. And that's the goal. Why do I do that? Because I want to be valued as a SaaS company. I don't want to be valued as a consulting company. The multiplier is only 1 to 2. The multiplier for a SaaS company is 4 to 5. Of course I want to do that because I want to sell my business someday. And so I've seen many businesses, been part of many businesses that have that kind of philosophy. They want to hook in the client to get them with this ongoing trailing SaaS revenue. But unfortunately, reality hits. And reality hits in the form of an optimization model. And each optimization model, as much as we would love to have this kind of rinse and repeat, it doesn't happen. Each business is different. They have different objective function. They have different constraints. They have different variables. Lo and behold, the new optimization model you've built is totally different. And it needs a bespoke person to manage it. And that doesn't look like SaaS in any one eye. Right? That becomes a problem. BCG's tackled this completely differently. And it's got this philosophy called build, operate, transfer. And the whole philosophy is kind of surrounding the idea that what you're going to do is help them build it and build out the platform and create it and work with them on that piece. You're then going to operate it with them side by side. So their team's going to be next to your team. And then at the right point in time, you're going to transfer it. And what that changes in terms of the dynamics between the level of engagement from both sides is quite different to what I'm used to. Historically, in the past, what you'd do is we'd have a massive team. We'd build the tool. There'd be a bit of input for them in terms of business requirements, in terms of feedback loops and that, but that'd be kind of on the side. And at one point, you'd have this sudden cutoff where you'd just be handing the tool over. In the BCG model, you've got significantly more engagement throughout the earlier phases. And then it's later on that you then start ramping that further up until it's 100% client. And that's that transfer phase. So you're operating it hand in hand with them. And then at some point you actually transfer it over. And that's kind of the big difference to what I'd experienced elsewhere within other organizations.
It's interesting. As the complexity of the tech stack grows, I feel like we need more of that kind of discipline.
Yeah.
And more of that kind of structure. And yet the flip side of which is if we're selling too low, we're trying to get in and get out.
Yeah. And that's been a problem I've seen in the past. And that was this one here. When we come to that point, I probably didn't tie off the loop there around how do we help them maintain it going forward. They can maintain it going forward because they have now got the skills. We've transferred it to a level where they're owning it. They're capable to do it. And I think as a consultant, where you're in that scenario, exactly, Vijay, where it's kind of like a race to the bottom. Who can win the deal with the lowest price?
Right.
You get caught in that kind of situation where everyone's trying to outbid everyone else, and you're kind of stuck with this not enough budget to do that transfer phase. You don't have enough budget to do that change management. You don't, and it's actually the client that loses out. If that actually allocated that additional budget and not tried to get to the lowest cost bidder, there would have been enough time and effort available to be able to properly transfer and realize the full value. A story that I always tell that I remember that really also drove home the impact that BCG has was I worked years ago with an organization in the retail sector. And in the retail sector, what happened was they wanted to be one of the first organizations to create this AI-driven pricing algorithm to be able to price their goods in real time because they had this way of showing customers what their price was. And so what we went and did is we came in and let's say the price of the project was $500,000 and we built this pricing tool for them and we rolled it out and they were all excited when they got it. And when we did the first A/B test to show the value, they said it was $5 million of value. And they were stunned. It was a 10 times ROI. And in that conversation, I was sad, really sad. And the reason why I was sad is because throughout the project, I saw that the optimization engine for our pricing had been heavily constrained by that. They just weren't willing to change the way they thought about pricing. They weren't willing to look at these other opportunities to drive their pricing. So really what happened there was that they didn't get $5 million. They lost $30 million because the real value to them should have been $35 to $40 million uplift. And who would have cared if you spent $500,000 versus $5 million? It didn't matter if you multiplied the cost of the project by 10, because if you had, you would have gotten $30 million uplift instead of $4.5 million uplift. Now, tell me as an organization, you wouldn't rather have the $30 million. And this is what I see over and over again in BCG, that we focus on the bigger picture and we're like, stop thinking about the cost, think about the value. And when you get companies to do that and they go after it, you get massive wins like that. I just see it everywhere.
Does let me ask a follow up on the going after the value, because I think that's an interesting one. So does going after the value, like when you set up projects like that, does it give you permission to spend a little more time on that 10%, the algorithms, just to make them better? I'm thinking like, where you could just use a simple heuristic, but we can invest a lot more to make an optimization engine, or invest a lot more to have machine learning feed an optimization engine. Does it give you permission to do those kinds of things when you properly sell the value?
Yeah, look, I definitely think it does because where you don't have enough time to develop the tool properly, you can kind of see the value that's missing on the table, that's lying on the table, that you've left on the table, and you're kind of saying, well, if we had more opportunity, we could increase this by a factor of X. But if you're under now a project that's got a specific scope, a specific time window, you're boxed in. No one cares about the conversation. When the project's kicked off, it's am I on time? Am I on budget?
Okay.
Am I on scope? No, but that's all anyone cares about. Once you've kicked off, that is the priority. It's people lose sight of, hey, how big an opportunity are we actually going after here? Do I have permission to chase the full opportunity, or am I just stuck now in this project box, which tells me I just have to hit scope, time, and budget? That's it. Nothing else now matters. And it definitely could be a bit more like that with the value, where we say, let's not rush this. Let's actually make sure we are making a long-term decision. And that comes back to kind of where BCG sits in the organization, dealing with the executives, focusing on the strategy, focusing on the big picture. Now lets you do that. Historically, in the organizations I've been in, we've typically maybe dealt with the GM level, and the GM's got a limited budget. They've got a specific target they've got to hit within this quarter or 6 months. They've got a specific time frame. It's just like, dude, I need that tool. Get it to me as quick as possible. So because my bonus is hanging on this, and no, I can't extend that. That was my budget for the year. That kind of plays a different role. BCG plays at that high level where we can open up the opportunities and really explore the real value.
So on that note, I got a great final question, right? Which is, I think we've all worked on projects where we've driven profitability and driven people's promotions and careers. Evan, the kind of closing question for you is what's your favorite example of a project either you or your organization has worked on that where you were like, yeah, we've actually improved people's lives as well, not just people's bottom line, but their lives?
Yeah, look, I think I've been lucky to work on a number of projects like that over my career, and in particular, ones that come to mind are ones in the retail sector where people tend to think of these things as kind of one-sided, especially in the retail sector where retail is selling goods to customers. But there's this one project that blew my mind because it achieved an outcome that everyone thought was impossible. It's paradoxical. This outcome should not actually happen, that customers win, that the organization wins, and that there's a bigger profit margin at the end of the day. It just didn't make sense that you could actually do that customers would be happier.
It's like a magic trick.
I know it was, and it's not that customers paid more. It was actually that customers overall somehow paid less. They got what they wanted for a better deal. It just didn't make sense, and it was kind of in the area of markdown optimization. So how do we set a markdown schedule where we're optimizing the set of prices to clear goods out of a store? And typically, if we look at it from an environmental perspective, if those goods are not sold, they actually end up in waste. They all get dumped in a bin, which is a terrible, terrible outcome. And for the customer side of things, they're kind of during a markdown phase, kind of sitting there waiting and playing this game of chicken with the company of how long can I wait to get the lowest price to get kind of the best deal possible. And so within this one project I worked on, what we're looking to do is instead of just doing this blunt markdown, it's like 30%, 50%, 70% at different points in time to clear the stock. We said, why don't we actually look at the price elasticity and the demand for these goods and try and figure out the right level of markdown to drive a better clearance of the goods. So with Nike goods, even a 5% or with Under Armour and all these other well-known brands, even a 5% markdown gets people excited and gets them in the store. Whereas with these lesser known brands, that initial 30 or 20% markdown is just not going to cut it. Like you've actually got to get it to 50% because you've got to get people to take a risk to have a shot at this new brand and to actually try and buy it. And so with this project, what ended up happening by adjusting these markdown prices, we're able to help the organization maintain greater profits because it wasn't necessary to mark down this Nike gear by 30% to get people buying it and people excited. 10 to 20% was sufficient. People were perfectly happy with that to get that opportunity. But these other goods we had to mark down harder. And so overall, we ended up coming up with this strategy that actually drove a greater profit margin for the organization. Customers were happier in the sense that we saw more goods get purchased overall. So more goods cleared through. So people were happy to get out the other end. And when we actually looked at the kind of customer loyalty and other metrics around are people coming back and enjoying the experience, they're actually higher as well because people were able to fill their basket with new goods and new brands they perhaps wouldn't have tried before because they've now seen this incredible offer that they're just willing to take advantage of. And so what that meant is less clothes and less goods went to the dump.
Yes.
So it didn't get dumped. People were happier and the organization had a greater profit margin at the end of the day. It was fantastic. It was the power of analytics. Instead of these blunt heuristics, analytics shone through and really got a win-win-win for everyone.
That's a great story. And again, kind of a magic trick.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, thinking, Mike, it reminds me a little bit about our conversation with Warren Lieberman around pricing markdowns and discounting.
Right. Yeah. The whole field of pricing and markdowns is kind of fascinating. Evan, you kind of highlighted it. It's an unexplored area, I think, and I think you guys uncovered some new insights, and that's
yeah. And I think it's moving away from those blunt instruments.
Right.
Like that's where analytics shines. Instead of just saying we just do this, it's getting the nuance into it, and you can't do that at scale without AI. This organization we worked with, I think, had 15,000 SKUs or something. Like a human being couldn't sit there every markdown period, which is like, I think once a quarter or once a season and go through and do it. It's just too much. It's impossible. And so there's enormous waste going on. I feel that like at scale, any big organization that operates at scale must have AI behind the scenes. Otherwise, they're just like this markdown. They're leaving money on the table and there's wastage occurring on people, environment, and product and everything. It just really, this is where we need AI today.
Well, Evan, to wrap up, can you tell people where they can find your books or which books you recommend that they get from you to learn more?
Well, obviously, I'm biased in that.
Yeah, go ahead, be biased.
That I definitely recommend Doug and my book, Why Data Science Projects Fail. It's on Amazon and Routledge and that, but it's a great read. And I think one of the big honors for me doing this book was actually getting Doug to write down some of his stories, like 40 years in the field. Incredible stories, just some of the biggest impacts. One of the ones that he had was his first project ended up saving an organization about $1 billion in today's money as a graduate. Just mind-blowing kind of numbers. And that was amazing just to capture that in that book. But there's so many great books out there. I guess what I'm kind of looking for in books nowadays, especially ones that kind of have people that have been on the front line building tools and have got that kind of experience. And you notice that when you read it from authors versus those that just kind of are jumping on the AI bandwagon and trying to be a part of the AI hype. Plus, I guess I'm quite intellectual, so I do enjoy books that have kind of a technical spin. And there's heaps of great books out there, like Why Machines Learn, which is a new one, which talks about the maths behind machine learning, but that's probably not appropriate for everyone. But there's other ones that get a bit into the technical stuff, like AIQ, but don't go all the way down to the mathematical details, but give you really the feeling for some of these lovely applications and stories like that. So I think there's a heap out there, but definitely I like to point people in the direction of me and Doug's book, just because I want to set expectations, say these things are
Yep.
hard. They're not easy. You can see some war stories in there and see the scars, and begin there and then work your way out from there.
Yep. Oh, that's terrific, and I'm well on the record as being a big fan of that book. My review was really a joy to write because these problems we don't talk about enough, and the more we don't talk about them, the more we don't address them.
Yeah.
Right. So, really, Evan, thanks for a great session, and everybody, thanks for joining us on the Decision Intelligence Lab podcast. Uh, If you like the episode, share it with some friends. If you didn't like the episode, share it with some enemies. Thanks again. We'll see you next
Well,
time.
thanks, Evan.
Thanks, guys.